Hello and welcome to another episode of PodcastDX, the show that brings you interviews with people just like you, whose lives were forever changed by a medical diagnosis. I'm Lita.
And I'm Ron.
And I'm Jean Marie.
Collectively, we're the hosts of PodcastDX. Today, we have the pleasure of speaking with Amanda Che. Excuse me if I said that wrong. I was BSing. All right, I could have asked you earlier.
Yeah, sorry.
Our speaker knows from firsthand experience that when you're relatively healthy, you tend not to think too much about wellness. But when this slips away and lupus comes barreling in, your world gets rocked. That's why she wrote the book, The Girlfriend's Guide to Lupus, to help other women struggling with this chronic disease feel less alone and more empowered to take control of their health and manage their lupus. Amanda holds a master's degree in counseling and owns Wonderment, a stress reduction and mindfulness training company. Oh, and Amanda and her oldest daughter both have lupus, which drives her absolutely crazy. When she's not planning her next travel adventure, she's drinking hot tea, walking her sweet dog in Raleigh, North Carolina, our favorite place, and giving book suggestions to anyone willing to listen. Please join me in welcoming Amanda.
Hi, Amanda.
Hi there.
Yeah,
Such a nice intro. Thank you very much for having me on. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, we love Southern Seasons is one of my favorite little shops.
In Raleigh?
It has shut down.
Oh!
I know. Great. This is not the way to start off the podcast. I loved it. I would go there for tea all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, because you can have your cup of tea and walk around and go, that's so
Yeah, I know.
I just made reservations for this July because there's a conference there. And I thought, oh, good. We're going to get back to Raleigh, get back to Durham.
The triangle.
Yep. and really get back to what we used to enjoy there, and it's gone.
Okay.
Don't worry. I'm going to send you some new things.
Okay,
Oh,
great.
yay,
Thank
yay.
you.
Yeah, we're
Thank
going to
you.
get this
It's just
going.
an evolution.
Okay.
We're going to get going back in a positive direction.
Okay, all
Hello,
right.
Amanda. Hello. And
Hello,
thank
friends.
you so much for taking the time out of your day to speak with us today.
My pleasure.
Well, we haven't talked about lupus much in a while. To refresh our memories and our guests, what exactly is lupus?
Lupus is a disease held by 1.5 million Americans. 90% of those babies are women, and it is considered both a chronic and an incurable autoimmune disease that the immune system goes haywire and it attacks those healthy cells, tissues, and organs. Now, that's very similar to a lot of autoimmune diseases, but usually autoimmune diseases target specific areas. Like I happen to also have Sjogren's, and that's usually getting in the moisture-producing cells in the eyes and the mouth and such. So what's weird and unique about lupus, it's like your fingerprint, right? It's unique to you. In fact, that they still use that when you go to jail in those instances. The same thing with lupus. How my symptoms are completely unique to me and so different from someone else. So some of the most common symptoms you see are fatigue, not like I need a little nap, like I'm exhausted, I have slept all night and I can barely get dressed. Joint pain, there's often fevers, hair loss sometimes comes with it, mouth and nose ulcers, a whole bunch of brain fog. I mean, I can go on and on about the conditions, but just know that it is a very serious disease where for some people, they can still die from this, and some people lose organs, and it can be quite significant in how it impacts someone in their life.
Right. And I think we generally just think of it as the lupus rash.
Oh, yeah.
But it's, as you were saying, it's quite a bit more extensive than that.
So I'm
Yes,
just gonna add that it's one of those invisible diseases that people don't see, quote unquote, anything wrong with you. So they always question why this and why that. I've had a student with that, and again, to see her physically, you're like, what's wrong with you? I mean, we wouldn't, but some people do. It's like, what's wrong with
many
you?
people do it.
Yeah.
I mean,
Exactly.
lupus is still unknown, right? They're like, oh, Selena Gomez has it. And I'm like, yes. And then that's usually all they know, right?
Right.
Right.
Okay. But I have had some, and the lovely, amazing friends will be like, how are you? And I don't know if I can say bad words on here, so I'll just say the word crap. I'm like, I feel like total crap. And they're like, really? They look at you like, really? But then I know they feel bad, but you look so good. And I'm like, no. We have to remember there's a storm raging inside people. Many, many illnesses are invisible illnesses, and we have to remember to not determine how much sympathy we give to someone just by looking at them.
Exactly.
And I think that takes us right into Lita's question.
Oh, well, I guess I'll take your question.
No.
Amanda, what signs and symptoms first signaled something was wrong in your life?
I'm an anomaly. So for most people, it takes between 5 to 7 years for a lupus diagnosis, which is a really, really long time, right?
Yeah.
It's because it mimics so many diseases. It progresses in stages. But for me, I'm an oddity. I most likely developed lupus when I was pregnant with my first daughter. So here's the thing. You have a gene, right? The genes variations hang out in you, and they can hang out forever without lupus, but you need an environmental trigger. For me, that was a very, very tough pregnancy. 7 hospitalizations, multiple feeding tubes that they told me would stay down, but I could fling them out really far, with vomiting it up. So that pregnancy was really tough, and that's probably what brought it all on. And then across, my oldest daughter's 23 now, and she also has lupus, which is rare. But across those years, those decades, I would just be like, ooh, my joints were always hurting, and I would just think I was a beast. And I was, I would do all these sports, and I would have these mouth sores all the time. And I would ask a dentist, and the dentist was like, oh yeah, it's fine. Like it was nothing. And then I would have all these blood issues. Like I lived in Florida, but my vitamin D was low, which is ironic.
Yeah.
Or my white blood cells were really low, or my platelets are low. So if you think of these conditions together, we see something's going on. But when I'm going to an orthopedist, like, hey, my joints hurt, or I'm asking my dentist, I'm going to primary care, and they're like, I don't know, let's just test your blood next time. We don't get a full picture. And so it really took me being adamant and being like,
you need to put this puzzle
something's
together.
wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's something wrong with me. Like I just feel terrible. What's going on? And that's how I ended up at an orthopedic physician, because I'm like, oh yeah, my joints are killing me. I would teach a workout class and come home and cry.
Oh,
That's just what you want from your instructor, right? Like, oh my gosh.
But
so he ran.
Yeah,
he
there's
ran
something
a
going
blood
on.
test.
Okay.
Yeah, he ran a blood test and found out that I had Sjogren's, and it still took another 8 years before lupus came up. Even though my blood test said I had Sjogren's, and I remember 100% the statistics were on neonatal lupus, and they were like, "You're not a baby," and I'm like, "No, I'm not." And then no one ever looked at that again.
Wow.
No one.
Wow.
So
Yeah,
So if you
We're
weren't
definitely
your own
specializing.
if you weren't your
Yeah.
own advocate,
if I wasn't fierce and demanding on what I knew I deserved, I would be in a much different space.
Okay.
But thankfully, I am.
right, and you're there for your daughter as well, so that's
Yeah, so literally 6 months after I was diagnosed, or 5 months, I turned to Anna, that's her name, and I'm like, I told you everyone has fingerprints that are unique, but we, being mother-daughter, have very similar traits. And I'm like, she had mono in college, and ever since she had mono, she was super sick. And I'm like, you have to go to my doctor. And it was instant, oh, you have lupus.
wow.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, it's not very common. So for those mothers out there, don't you
Don't
worry,
panic,
because
right.
most of the time, yeah. I have another daughter who's younger, and I watch her like a hawk. And I'm like, oh, how are you? She's like, I'm having hair loss. I'm like, get into your primary care. We're going to run this test and this test and this test. Oh, you're fine. Okay.
Right. And Amanda, what causes your particular symptoms to flare?
Good questions. I mean, an obvious easy one is stress.
Okay.
Right? And I know not all stress is the same. There is some great stress out there, good stress, motivating stress, but usually it's the heavy, chronic, or long-term intense stress is one. If I get off my metrics, like when I went to Vegas with some girlfriends and we were staying up till like midnight to 3 a.m, I came home and I was in a flare. And travel can also do that when I go international and I change time zones. So for me, it's really a balance between how do I honor what I know I need and how do I can still continue to have fun in life, right? Like I don't want to be like, it's bedtime, I must go to bed to feel good. I'm like, no, I need to be able to do this. So it's a lifetime of self-awareness and assessment to determine where I am today.
Okay.
Well, you're a very well-balanced woman to be able to do that.
Right.
We applaud you for that. And I hope that others
you.
can pick up from your attitude and go out there and take on the world themselves.
So
Well, you bring up a good point. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Finish.
Well, for me, I have had a lifeline seems like dramatic, but I have always been focused on health and health related things, working out and mindfulness, all of these components. And I remember being at home with lupus not long after diagnosis, and it was like a woe is me day, right? I was feeling like, oh my gosh, I've ate salad for decades. I've worked out since I was 18. This is not fair. You know, I should not have this. And I just came to the realization like, oh, I could be worse. You know, my health could be a lot worse. Perhaps I'm doing okay, and perhaps my health or my habits that I've done for so long have really helped me. And I think that's what, if you read the book, that's the idea I give them. Like lupus has robbed you of part of your health. It's unfair. We don't have any justification. Life is unfair. But that does not mean that you still do not hold control of your health, because the healthier you can be, the more manageable your lupus is.
Okay. Yeah.
Great
That's
advice.
Yep. Great advice.
So you mentioned earlier a lot of the things that you went through to finally get your diagnosis. What are your tips for finding the right rheumatologist?
And we do know, and we know that this is a section of your book as well. So for those who want a very detailed answer, you're going to have to check out the book. Yeah. But if you could give us
please,
just like
of course, read the book.
a quick blurb from that.
Sure. I think that to find a good rheumatologist, you have to be, like I'd mentioned before, relentless in your health. You don't have to ask permission, nor do you have to give apologies. So for me, it was, even though I live in Raleigh and we have Duke and we have UNC, some great healthcare systems with cutting edge science, it's still very tough to get in to see people. And at times it took me 8 months to get into my current rheumatologist. So the first thing I would say is, if you're under the care of someone and you don't feel heard, you don't feel listened to, you don't understand what they say, they talk over you, find someone else. But find someone else while staying under their care and asking for a second opinion. And the second opinion is, can you give me a referral to Dr. Smith?
Okay.
You don't have to say why. You don't have to apologize. You can simply ask for a referral.
Okay.
That's one thing. The second thing I would do is, there are nonprofit organizations like the Lupus Foundation of America. Not every state, but often states have them. North Carolina has one. And I reached out to them. Give me the list of all your rheumatologists. And I went through the list to find who it was. And I would cross-reference that against reviews, which always aren't correct. And then I would call and find out how long the wait is and kind of get in there. And then also, if you have anyone who goes to a rheumatologist, ask your friends. Like I would just like turn over every corner, dig through the house like a lost diamond earring, trying to find who you think is the best rheumatologist. And yes, it takes a while, but in the end, I want you to be comfortable with someone who cares for you, where you feel heard and listened to. And what my rheumatologist does that's so great is that she'll come in and say, first thing to me is, what do you want to talk about today?
Oh.
Not like, let's talk about your lab. She literally like, you're guiding my conversation. What is it today? And a relationship with your rheumatologist is that, a relationship. It's not where I go in and someone talks to me and I nod my head and I go home. It's a give and take. It is mutual respect. I'm not yelling at her. She's not yelling at me. She asks me something, I give her the truth if I'm doing it or if I'm not doing it. And I think it takes all of these components to pull together to find a really great rheumatologist.
So yeah, I think that's really, well, I can't even think of the word I'm looking for.
That's key for any healthcare provider.
Well, it is. And I don't teach that in medical school. It's the bedside manner.
Right.
I mean,
and some people should be in research and some people should be practicing. Yeah.
But if you don't feel comfortable talking to your doctor, then you're not going to be
getting the right care.
Right. And if your doctor isn't
listening to you.
Yeah. Sometimes I think healthcare providers need to take a moment and say, hey, you know, I'm seeing people and people are part of my practice. And also, I think it behooves us all to realize that the healthcare providers are also people and sometimes they'll have an off day.
Of course, yeah,
which is
just like
yep,
we do.
Yep. But,
Well, I tell you all these things,
Yes.
but I still tell you that I had a terrible rheumatologist before my last one, but I couldn't get into anyone else. She was the only one who could care for me. She was the one who diagnosed lupus, but she has been fired from that position, but she was completely unresponsive. When I would be like, I'm doing so bad. I was in a flare. I felt really terrible, and I would email, and I would call repeatedly. And I couldn't just switch to another rheumatologist. I went into her and said, I have been trying to get a hold of you. I have emailed you. I have called you. I have not had a response back to you. This is not care that I expect out of my physician. This is very important. And so she gave me her personal email. It didn't matter. Nothing happened. Didn't matter. It didn't matter. And it was so frustrating. And I won all, my energy was like, I just wanted to run over just like one toe of hers, maybe two toes with my car. I was so mad at her and the care that I was giving. And it was taking away from me just being able to heal.
Right.
And so eventually I found another one. And then I went back and wrote a review.
Okay.
But at that time, like I tell you these things, but then the reality is life doesn't always end up like that. Sometimes you have to stay with a really poor physician until you get to another one.
Right. And
rough.
and I think if you have that feeling like this isn't working out, honoring that feeling is really vital. And you do have amazing tips in your book, which we thoroughly enjoyed reading, by the way.
Oh, good. Thank you.
So how did you and your healthcare team eventually decide to treat your condition?
Luckily, it became a collaboration. The doctor says, after listening to you, looking at your labs, I think this or this. I want you to go home, read through this or this, and then come back to me or message me in the portal and tell me what you want. And that I have found is a great method. Instead of you need this, here you go, take this. Instead, a good physician I find allows a give and take in care. And so that's really where we are today. Now, the younger me, back when I had Sjogren's and they said, you should take this medicine, I was like, psh, don't they know who I am? I can push through all these things. I'm strong like ox. I can get through it. And I learned that wasn't true. So it takes an open mind on the patient's behalf. It takes an open mind also on the physician's half. And because I trust my physician, if she says, she never would. Like if she said, eat a lemon every day, I'd be like, let me look into it. And if I found that was good, I would, go back to her. So those things have to kind of fire up. But in the end, I have to be my own best advocate.
Right. And it is kind of amazing that there's so much information available. I mean, you really do have to sort through the information.
Yes.
But just the access we all have nowadays to research and is just astonishing, which can be good and bad.
Yes.
I was going to say,
true.
we were
Right.
just talking about AI in medicine, and it could definitely be good or bad.
Yeah. But it's nice that we can easily access it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
We don't want to use it as sole diagnosis.
Right,
We have a physician as well.
Right.
Okay.
Go
I have
ahead.
a question I'm dying to ask you.
Let's hear it.
What was your inspiration? What inspired you to write your book, The Girlfriend's Guide to Lupus?
If you could see outside my window, I first of all, I always knew I would write a book. And I wanted to write a book. My husband is Asian. He's a refugee. So I wanted to write a book about crazy Asians. And then that Crazy Rich Asian book came out. So that was done. So I was walking my dog down the street one day. And I mean, it sounds very cliche. It was like a lightning bolt where I was just like, I'm going to write a book for women with lupus. Because when I was diagnosed, I got this, probably on my shelf behind me, this really thick book about lupus. I think it's called the Encyclopedia of Lupus. And it told me a whole bunch of what I wanted to know about lupus. But there were still so many things that I didn't know. And I felt all alone and I felt really scared. And my family meant well, but they couldn't help me. So I wrote the book that I really needed when I was diagnosed. That felt like a high five. It felt like a hug, and it felt like oh crap, that sucks kind of deal all in one. And that's what I wanted women to know, that this is not anything we want. We didn't bring it on. We didn't do anything wrong, but nonetheless, it is here, and it's probably going to be here with us for a lifetime. So we better begin to understand it better and allow it to work the best it can in our life.
Okay. Yeah, that's inspired.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah,
think
it is.
it's a great book to get if you personally have lupus, but it's also a great book to give you a better understanding of someone else's situation. So if you have a friend or a family member who's living with lupus, it's a great book to read so that you have a better understanding of what they're living with.
Thank you. I've heard several friends have actually reached out to me after I wrote the book. I didn't even know they got the book, and they would come and say like, "I'm so sorry," and I'm like, "What?" They're like, I feel like I've been a terrible friend to you," and I'm like, "Oh," and I don't think they were. I just think because that invisible illness, like, "Oh, you look fine. You're dressed. You're on that podcast. You must be doing fine." So I think that a lot of assumptions were made, and the book will allow the caregivers and the supporters of those to open their eyes to what people go through.
Right. Yeah. It does. It gives you a window into the life and allows you to empathize more with everyone living with the condition.
And as you know, I tried to be I was very vulnerable at times, sharing lots of stories of how I screwed things up yet again, or I did the wrong thing, or I felt really terrible. And my hopes was just that people understood that I know sometimes how to do better, but that doesn't always mean that I do those things, and that it's okay. It's a lifetime of coming back to the table, pulling out, an eraser and a pencil and being like, let's try again.
Sure. Yeah. That's a great approach. I can appreciate that. Amanda, how has lupus affected your everyday life? What modifications help you enjoy recreational and leisure activities? Because you are such a go-getter, especially in the hotter months of the year, in North Carolina.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We have some heat here. Today it's 70, in fact. I know. It's lovely. I was teaching yoga this morning, and it was still 50 degrees, so it was great.
Wow.
So my life has been altered by lupus in many different ways. The me before was let's go run some races. I'm going to compete. I'm going to jump around. I'm going to do all these things. I'm going to tackle all that I can. And I've learned that no longer does my body respond well. So you'll see me doing just even physically things that are different. I teach yoga. I take yoga. I walk the dog, and yoga is not the answer for everything, but it is something that works well for me. I walk. I'm much more gentler physically on my body, and I'm much gentler emotionally. And that side, the emotional side, I'm still working through. I've got some great therapy that I have been working on. I actually had, this is a tip for someone, is I found a chronic pain counselor, which I didn't even know was an option. And that's such a great space of someone who understands this whole chronic pain world to come to. So, my life is definitely different. Is it any better or any worse? It's hard to determine because I've had to continually wrap my brain kind of through a grieving process of it being different than what I wanted. And that's okay. So right now on a daily basis, I feel like I'm doing okay, but I'm always hesitant because the wording is, how am I doing today? Because tomorrow might be another day.
Well, I'm sure it's a process too. I mean, it's not just on or off. I mean, it's concurring.
Yes, very true.
So how has living with lupus influenced how your daughter Anna views your condition?
Well,
and probably vice versa too.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. It gets a little deep, but as a mom, I think one of the reasons why I ended up with lupus was simply to be a mom to her. If she's going through something like that, right?
You wanted to be able to empathize wholeheartedly.
Yeah, Well, and you saw the book. I mess things up sometimes, but I'm so grateful to have her. She's 23, so I can lean on her and she can lean on me. There was a time where it was a day where I felt terrible and I refused to talk to my husband. I didn't even, I felt so bad physically. I wanted no one in my life. I just wanted to go in a hole, but I wanted Anna. And so I called her and I'm sure I was crying. I feel so bad. And it was just, that's all I needed, to be with someone who understood what I was going through. And on her end, I feel terrible that she has to deal with this. I don't hold on to a ton of mother's guilt because simply I did not know. If there was something I would have known, I would have told her. I would have been stay out of the sun, don't get mono, all these things that I personally can't control. So I have to rest in the fact that I did the best that I could to help her, but I couldn't help myself. But I do also, acknowledge that I spent decades with lupus, but not knowing I had lupus. And that's way better in some regards to knowing that you have it and it's something you deal with at a young age.
Yeah, but if you're feeling like crap, as you said, and you know something's going on, it's got to be frustrating as all hell to know that there is something you can't pinpoint what it is. At least if you know what it is, it's not going to make it easier per se, but at least you know what's going on. It's the unknown or the not knowing that's got to be frustrating.
Yes, that's certainly that 5 to 7 year diagnosis is brutal. And I do think Anna has a great advantage that at, in the age of 20 or whatever she was exactly when she got it, she started on a medication that I didn't start on until my, 40s. And so she has 2 decades ahead of this medicine that we have a lot of research for that's been very beneficial. I was speaking to a gentleman whose he has lupus, which is rare, as you learned, and then his daughter had lupus, and I almost like cry. Oh my! And he had said, like, stop. Look at her. I mean, she was getting an infusion at a young age, and he had just said, oh my gosh, she's getting this when she's so young. She's going to be okay going forward. We're attacking this at a young age. And so it allowed me to just be like, okay, this medicine is very helpful. We can do it.
Right. Good.
Yeah.
And what role does nutrition play in living with lupus?
It is not everything. And it is everything all in one. Okay, let me explain.
Yeah.
There is not, when most people think of healthy, I live a healthy lifestyle. I eat carrots and I run 10 miles a day, right? This is what we think of. How you eat and how you move your body are parts of wellness, your health, which is true. But there's also a lot of different things. If you go online, I follow the idea that there's 8 parts of your health. Right? Okay. There's spiritual health, there's social health, all of these different things. So if we just give the fact that nutrition is one piece of it, that's true. But there's many other things, because you could eat good food all you want and you could sleep terrible and you can not deal with stress and life can be really hard. So nutrition is one key in that puzzle piece that holds everything together. And so the nice thing I've learned about lupus is I thought when I was writing the book that I would find the magic thing, like, oh, it's going to be plums or it's going to be cranberries or something. And I'm going to be the cranberry girl. But what I found out is research doesn't have any specifics yet when it comes to lupus, meaning it's not paleo, it's not gluten-free, it's not eating organic. It's simply eating the way that you know we should eat, similar if you have cancer or a heart disease where you need lots of fruits and vegetables and you need to watch your saturated fat and get rid of some of the processed food the best you can. All of these things come together into making up part of your nutrition, which makes up a piece of your health.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great summation. Amanda, what advice do you have for someone who feels their healthcare provider is not listening to them, dismisses their concerns and symptoms out of hand, or is otherwise unhelpful? Because you do talk about gaslighting and everything. And so, what advice do you have for someone in that situation?
Well, first of all, knowing that rheumatologists are limited in our U.S., they're dwindling, they're hard to get into someone else. Most likely, I would encourage someone to first, where you're at, begin to clarify your expectations, clarify the comments or your feedback to your physician. Okay. That might be, hold on, I don't think what I said got the attention. Let me say it again and we can talk about it, right? It's having these boundaries for yourself. Or I would like this test ordered. If that's something you won't do for me, will you mark that in my chart that you won't order that test? So first of all, going to the physician and dealing with the physician. Most of the time the physicians don't have this type of feedback, right? You get mad at your physician, you go home and you write a scathing review or you find someone else. But I would encourage people to try to go to the physician, talk to a physician. I don't feel heard in this situation. I would like to tell you more about this, right? That's a very direct approach that yes, takes a little bit more courage, but I think that it warrants it. If that doesn't work, I would go on to say that, are there other physicians in the practice that you can get care under? Is there an office manager that you can speak to regarding the situation and get some advice there? Again, you can always get the second opinion, and then you can go on. If it ends up being a situation that was bad or you felt that it was harmful to you, you have the right to go and write a review. You have a right to go to the medical board. You have all these options. I would tell patients that there are both federal patient rights and state patient rights. So you need to know in your state what your rights are. Like for North Carolina, you have the right to bring someone who is not a family member into the hospital to see you.
Oh, okay.
Not everyone does that because they often say, well, you're not a family member. Well, my right in North Carolina is I'm going to bring John. John's going to be my person. Okay. So if we know these things, when we're armed with knowledge and we go back and we don't attack, but we instead use our own boundaries to say what we want or what we're feeling, it allows for a more open conversation.
Okay.
Very
That's
helpful.
great advice.
Thank you.
Now that we have discussed the basics about lupus, I think our customers have a better understanding of this condition. In order to better serve our guests and listening audience, we are now working as an affiliate with a major medical supply warehouse located here in the United States. You will find our affiliate links on our website. Our goal is to tailor specific medical supplies and equipment based on individual diagnoses to make it less stressful than looking through an entire catalog for what you might need. We are open to your suggestions and will adjust our offerings based on what you, our guests, and listeners find helpful.
Thank you, Ron. And speaking of personalized medical supplies, are there any that you personally prefer to use when your lupus is raging?
For me, and I've been in the field before of healthcare and sales, so I know of it. The DME, durable medical equipment, the DME. Thankfully, at this moment, I am not needing any DME equipment when my body is raging. It often means a lot of downtime, a lot of rest, doing things that I know mean taking care of me, like taking a hot Epsom salt bath or eating food that I know is definitely rich in nutrients. So thankfully, at the moment, I have not gone into the DME world, but I know that there's great resources out there, and for people who have mobility issues or having those things, reaching out and having that discussion on how to best take care of you and how to best be comfortable when you deal with your life, whether it be lupus or any other chronic illness, is very important.
Very good. Thank you. And what role have your family and friends played in your healthcare journey?
Oh, they have lots of different roles. My husband's we all are a work in progress, but my husband is one who's often had to learn on the fly with me. He was the one in the book where I talked about coming up with a 10 scale program because I was tired every morning when he would be like, "How are you today?" And I'd be like, "Crappy." Every day I ask you crappy. So that's when we came up with like a number 1 is low and 10 is like, "Oh, you better get me to the ER," where I would just be like, he's like, "What number?" And I'm like 7. And then we would go on throughout our day. So he's there. And I have 2 daughters, which are lovely. They are my biggest, best me source of, inspiration. But I'm a very choosy chick. I don't have a ton of people in my life, but the people I have are ride or die friends. So usually, my Megan is my bestie from college, my roommate, and she's usually the one that it's either my family and Megan that I call when things are rough. But I do have some lovely friends, and I know that my friends would be so happy. They just would chomp at the bit if I'm like, "Hey, can you walk my dog? Can you go get me some food?" It's just often, those things I think we take on ourselves, but the people in our lives would be really happy to help out too.
Right. And you were saying like the elements of wellness, definitely one of those keystones for me is helping others. Because because of how much we benefit from helping others. And it's give your family, your friends and family that opportunity. And it's great that you have quality over quantity, and that's wonderful. And they're there for you, which is great. Amanda, what tips do you have for dealing with stress?
I think the first thing I would say is understand that not all stress is bad stress. It's not all doom and gloom, right? If you think about it, how many things in your life have been really stressful, but they turned out good? Like growing a baby was really hard. Having a puppy was really hard. Moving, starting a new job, writing a book. These were all hard, stressful things, but in the end, something came from them. That challenge, that motivation the stress gave me resulted in some type of increase of knowledge, of understanding, of resilience. So the first thing we got is understanding not all stress is bad. And then knowing that the big chronic stress that we can't control, that is coming at us and harming our health, that's the one I would challenge people to take a look at, to begin to understand, even though you can't control it, is this something that you need around? Is it a job, not just taking a vacation from your job, but is this something, maybe a career change that needs to be looked at and go back on? I'm not big on the Band-Aid approaches to things because, Band-Aids come off and the scar is still there and it has to heal. So taking those big step back and assessing where you are in life. Is this something, okay, this is really stressful, but I know I'm going to be done with the book and then it's going to feel so good, right? Giving that assessment allows you to determine the outlook in a more positive way. Not that positive is always what we want. It's just that assessment, like, okay, this is temporary. It's going to get me what I want. And so I know it's got to be stressful to go through. Okay.
You touched on it a little bit earlier, Amanda, but why is mental health care a crucial part of someone's overall health?
Well, it is one part of our health, and there's lots of other parts, as we talked about, physical, social, and such. So mental health, it's kind of like when you go to the dentist. Isn't it so weird when we go to the dentist, that's a different dental plan? Because it's like our teeth are not part of our body.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. Okay.
And they're so expensive, but it just makes no sense to me. So the same thing I think of like a dentist, I think of as our mental health. Like, why isn't all of that covered all the time? It still is me. It still is my body. It still impacts every single thing that I do, how I show up in work and in my relationships and how my lupus is. All of it pertains to mental health. And unfortunately with lupus, you are at a big increase in the amount of depression and anxiety that someone experiences. Whether lupus bring this on or you have this as a result of having lupus, it doesn't matter, because I think in the end is you have mental health challenges there as well.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, mental health is huge, and it's unfortunately not overlooked, but underserved.
Yeah. And the connection between that and how you feel is really important. So, I know I have my master's in counseling, but even, the more recent years, I've really been like, okay, my answer to everything seems to be like, let's do some therapy. Let's do group therapy. Let's do individual therapy. Let's do chronic pain therapy. It's just allowing some neutral party, some Switzerland party to help me understand me better.
Yeah. And it can facilitate everything else as well. Because, if you're not in a positive frame of mind, which can be challenging to get there, you need more pain medication. Pain is, I feel you.
All ties in.
Yes. I love your dental analogy. That's a great one. Amanda, what are some of your favorite resources, organizations, and support groups for individuals living with lupus?
One of my first resources, which isn't an organization per se, is seeing if you can find one person who may have an illness. Is it lupus? Is it RA that you have going on with? Because it's much easier when I have Anna, which is lovely, but I also now have some lupus friends. And when I'm feeling bad, when I'm like, hey, look at this rash, or what is this? I have now another good friend, Tina, and I'm like, what's going on? How can I help you? And that's what we support each other on. So that would be the first thing, get a good friend if you can. The second thing is there are nonprofits out there like Lupus Foundation of America. I went on Capitol Hill this year. I got to speak to Congress and my House of Representatives on lupus advocacy, and I did that with their backing and their guidance, which was a lot of fun. There's also a local chapter that is lovely. The director, Lakeisha, does an amazing job. But there are also nonprofits like Lupus LA, which is out in California. There's Kaleidoscope Fighting Lupus. There's Lupus Research Alliance. So there are people out there. I would tell someone to just reach out when you need help. They have support groups. They have a lot of things. And don't be afraid to go to them and tell them what you need. They probably have something to help you.
Okay.
Thanks.
That's great
Good
advice.
Yeah.
And speaking of advice, Amanda, what advice do you have for someone that has a friend or a family member who was recently diagnosed with lupus?
One, get that book. Read that book. That's an easy one.
Nice plug.
All right.
Yeah, I know. Thank you. Oh, I got so happy I lost an earplug. The second thing I would tell someone is if you are new or your family member is new or a friend has lupus, offer to have a sit down with them. In my book, I called it a support caucus, right? I called to get together a like-minded loved ones and really talk about the nitty gritty because most people aren't going to know what you're going through. So if you tell or if you learn as a caregiver or a friend what this person is up against, what their fears may be, what the future may look like, and how you can best support them going forward, certainly in a time when they're feeling decent or healthy, they can talk about it when they're not in crisis mode,
Right.
is really helpful. And I learned from Sheryl Sandberg. She wrote the book. It's right there on my bookshelf, Option B. I learned from her this idea of how are you today, right? It's this today thing that's really important, not just like, how are you doing? Or, it's just like checking in with someone today. How are you today? Whether it be a text, a phone call, or a meeting.
Right.
Yeah, that would make a big difference in someone's life. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for sharing your story with us today. Amanda, where can we pick up our copy of The Girlfriend's Guide to Lupus? Well, we got a copy, but where can our listeners?
Yeah. You can go on Amazon. Amazon has my book. And then I also, if you want more information or you want to read some more, you can go to amandachay.com. Don't you know that website was available? It's CHAY. And then I'm on Instagram at Amanda E. Chay. Oh, and I do have a YouTube channel. That's been a lot of fun.
Okay. I will definitely be reaching into your YouTube channel because
right.
when we post each episode, I will go to YouTube and try to find videos that support the episode. Well, yours will be.
There you go.
Yeah, I don't have to work.
Yeah. You're welcome. I hooked you up.
Thank you.
Speaking of thank you for your time, Amanda. It was a pleasure having you today. If our listeners have any questions or comments let me try that again. If our listeners have any questions or comments related to today's show, they can contact us at PodcastDX@yahoo.com, through our website, PodcastDX.com, on Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, or Instagram.
I know it's X now. Oh, we have to change
I don't
the
think
script.
we're even on
No,
X.
actually, I think we got rid of Twitter, right?
Yeah, I don't think we're on.
Okay,
We're not
so
on.
All
you
right,
can get us
forget
at
Twitter.
Okay, but yeah.
PodcastDX.com, Facebook, Pinterest, or Instagram.
Or
Yeah.
TikTok.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
And if you have a moment to spare, please give us a review wherever you listen to this podcast.
And please keep in mind that this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or treatment and before undertaking a new healthcare regime, and never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you've heard of this podcast.
Till next week.